Yes, I hope you will still make with us the last round of the panel, finalizing this symposium of this afternoon, Connecting Cities. And one question to you, have you all seen the film of this morning session when we started? Who didn't see it? Because I think it's quite good. Who didn't see it raises the hand. Okay. Yeah, so there are a lot of people who didn't see it, so they will make it run for us at the very end. And yes, connecting cities is a large topic, and we received a lot of input from you this afternoon. And in this last round, I would shortly present different positions because of Connecting Cities is an EU-funded project, and we deal with this whole creative potential of commercially used urban screens and media facades. And I'm very happy, first of all, to present also some partners here and who are sitting over there. So we have Darko Fritz from Museum of Contemporary Art in Zagreb. We have Yannick Antoine von Imal in Brussels, Gano Chertoy from the Media Architecture Institute in Vienna, and Minna Taka from MCult in Helsinki. Then there must be Diana around. Exactly, she is or was the artistic director of European Capital of Culture in Riga. So sorry? And of course, us Electronica, Future Lab in Linz, who are these wonderful hosts of this session. I think what was very interesting in this afternoon is that we had a very interdisciplinary approach through the post toolkit, and we come to the period. It would be lovely if we already would have this toolkit. Now we come into this evaluation period to, yes, also collect all these ideas for the Connecting Cities toolkit, and there was a lot of inspiration. So Connecting Cities and this whole infrastructure of media facades, of course, is a cooperation model. So the most important issues, if you deal with this topic, is of course the position of the city, then the technologies. If you want to include the public audience in creative processes, the whole interaction technologies play a very big role, and we experimented with EEG helmets, with digital slingshots and arrows and bows to reclaim the screens. And of course, we have the whole issue about the content and the public audience. So together with you now, we want to open these positions. And so the first question, what I would ask, if we say Mike is the expert of content, Mike, which content, especially, yes, let's say political content, would you like to see on these media facades and screens?
Okay, this doesn't work.
Yeah, take mine.
Thank you. Oh, I don't believe in experts. My name is Mike Stubbs, and I'm the person from the big society. I live in England, in Liverpool, and I work at FACT. In terms of curating content within the context of Connecting Cities, we had some good money from the European Union to make experiments with artists, probably about 25 artists in all, across a 3-year period, across a growing network. We started with 8 European partners and have ended up with nearly 20. And of course, that just creates great opportunity for artists to make new work. So we start with some big ideas, and listening to the presentations today begs me to ask a few questions which I want us to consider this afternoon. So it's not about the ideal work for the ideal context. It's really about where do our intentions meet reality. So, a lifetime of either making art or curating art means that you always retain some kind of hope that you're going to create some kind of change or do something new. And in the early 1990s, maybe there was a sort of techno-positivism that we would kind of reshape society through different rules of relational making. And when we come maybe towards the end of this talk, I'd like to raise some very big issues. Where we've succeeded best from the content that's been curated so far is where there has been duration and there has been a genuine commitment to working with people over a longer period of time. So that what Susa didn't mention, of course, is that this project started with a previous EU-funded programme, Media Facades. And that was very kind of techno-centred, and it was much more about infrastructure, LED screens on buildings, and how we could join them together and distribute the content. And increasingly it's become more social. So I actually wrote down this morning or last night the notion flash mesh. And I know that may resound with Derek in terms of the kind of McLuhanism, but effectively it's no longer about the technology at all. We've seen some wonderful kind of explorations of innovation and utility, but I also still believe in art. And the reason I believe in art is because artists have license to ask questions of how the society is run, or what we think about the world in a way that nobody else has. And it still has a position in society, in my view. Having said that, when Arts Electronica or FACT or ZKM were first formed, we did believe that we were going to break down the boundaries between the viewer and the maker. We did think that there were going to be new levels of interaction between the object and the audience. These were all very real. And perhaps now that there is a new generation, which is here, and also represented within the Connecting Cities workshop producers, of people that are kind of just rethinking that. But it does leave me with some big questions. So again, the successes are where there are TAZs, and I'm using the term from the early 90s, the temporary autonomous zone, where groups of people collect together. The best we can do with these sorts of public works are to start conversations and employ the discursive. And hopefully there'll be a bit of discourse at the end of this session. I always go back to Krzysztof Dyszko. Some of you will have heard me present about him before, because this is a model from 1985, pre-video projection, pre-digital, when he made a series of political interventions into the public domain, actually, internationally, but using slide projection. And perhaps some of the statements that he made in those early works actually still carry as much political force as many contemporary works, despite the fact that the technology and networks have improved. So the question that I'm going to finish with before I hand over to Nuria is, in relationship to the notion of connecting cities, in the context of post-city, yeah, we're with this supposition, apart from the joke about the post office, we've got this supposition that we're all kind of somehow nomadic, post-city people. And of course, it's great that we've got nation-state and not city-state rather than nation-state. But at the moment, I am being flooded with a barrage of completely vile imagery and news reports about refugeeism. Yeah, and the way that that's being reported. And therefore, I cannot disconnect the grand order of disaster that the world is currently facing. Yeah, as we see basically millions of people die in the sea or in trucks trying to cross Austria. And yet we can talk within our kind of techno-utopianism about connecting cities or the notion of the post-city. Because, of course, many people don't even have a city because they've been displaced from it, largely by our actions, or we've certainly contributed to that agenda. So I feel quite raw as we actually start the evaluation process about what we did. And of course, again, all we can do as artists and curators are kind of small steps. I think that's the best that we can really do. But we have to do a bit more maybe, or think a bit harder, think outside of our closed groups and privilege.
Thank you, Mike. I'd like to start with drawing up on what you just mentioned and thinking about for whom we're making these projects and who is going to benefit eventually out of what we do. And if at the very beginning, I think we were, as a group, or at least in Media Lab Prado, we were interested in questioning how can we expand the amount of actors and agents that are involved not only in the participation of the projects outside in the public space, but how we can increase the amount of people that participate. And here maybe with Dieter we can reframe the question or use another word which is not participation, but still how can we expand the amount of agents that are involved in the production of those projects. And more than anything, who would benefit from doing something in a public screen, and who can benefit from having their own ideas, opinions, etc. being displayed in a public space. And that we have developed that in two different directions, I would say. The first one would be trying to think, and this connects also, Mike, to your initial proposal, which was to engage with duration. So projects need to last much longer than what we expected at the very beginning that they should, or would be ideal that they would, in order to be able to generate larger processes of engagement with other people, let's say. And then another shift that we've done is to try to, instead of trying to engage only with the outside, we've identified that whenever we involve projects with lines of research that are already taking place within Media Lab Prado, and those lines of research involve communities of interest, people that are not necessarily neighbors from that specific location, but are people living in Madrid in general, the relationships between the artists and the communities there, and also how those communities allow us to expand to other people interested in those projects has been pretty successful. So in a way, understanding that participation not only to the outside, to the neighborhood, but also to the inner communities of Media Lab Prado. And then I would say that the challenge now would be how we can engage with the neighborhood itself. Because of course, Media Lab Prado has a permanent screen that it's in one of its facades facing a small public square. And then one of the challenges is how we engage with the local people, like actually living there in the adjacent housing blocks. And that has been, for now, not an easy task, because it's a gentrified neighborhood and has its own difficulties. But nevertheless, it's one of the challenges that we are facing, and that would be very interesting to develop in future projects like Connecting Cities. But this brings to a question that maybe I would like to ask you, Susa, and relates to the business model that facades use, or large-scale urban displays are using. Because we have our own as a public cultural institution, but then that doesn't happen in other institutions of the network, and that is making visible the difficulties not only of showing content and for whom we were making that content, but also the possibilities of displaying certain projects or others. So maybe you have a say on that. Thank you.
Yes, of course. I think it's interesting if we have a look who became a new partner of Connecting Cities. Because originally we started with this idea to explore the creative potential of commercial urban screens, but at the end it were not the commercial urban screens networks who wanted to join us, but we can say it were more cities or cultural institutions, community-run screens. And what is interesting, of course, is at the moment when we opened these urban screens with interaction technologies to create a moment where the public audience could, participate or could interact, then it was the starting point that we moved away from urban screens and their creative potential of a commercially run infrastructure towards, I would say, towards kind of co-creation of our cities, because suddenly we transformed then and opened them as platforms, as shared encounters, platforms for shared encounters and platforms for the community. And this is not at all the business model of urban screens holders, because the business model of urban screens, commercially run urban screens networks, is that thousands of people pass by within a very short time. Let's say most of the content of commercial urban screens is 20 seconds, so pass by a lot of people and they don't want at all a moment of interaction. And so therefore, yes, it was like a journey towards to this whole debate of social smart cities, where we explored media facades and media architecture as a kind of, yeah, would say, platform for shared encounters with these three city topics: networked city, participatory city, and visible city.
I'd like to just add in that as we observe that change, it's interesting, you saw an image earlier in the film of the Chris O'Shea piece, Hand from Above, that was displayed on the BBC big screen in Liverpool, which we had access to. That's no longer there because it needed renewing. So in terms of like the idea of intervening into public space, even within a 3 or 4 year period, we can't really say public anymore because it's all pretty much private. So our shopping centre is, say, 25% of the footprint of Liverpool. Therefore, we're negotiating with a corporate owner. And I think that really where we're heading going forward is, of course, we acknowledge and admire the brilliant projects, and there have been some fantastic ones, like my favourites were Telepuppets by Ali Momeni, where I actually went to Iran and filmed people, then played them to people from Iran living in Liverpool, with this little kind of miniature TV studio you might have seen an image of. And then, of course, Ghana Think Tank, who have actually been working right across a number of our partnerships, US-based group who outsource first world problems to the third world. The idea of reversing that politic and discussion, but both as a provocation, but also to try and find some alternative solutions. Similarly, with the Constitute, they did a project called Human Being, where they worked with local beekeepers in 3 cities. And they worked with different schools to teach them how they could learn to keep bees and set up their own hive in their school. And then they got the bees to communicate across cities in different countries. So there's some sort of very, very great examples of where it really worked, and it brought together our ambition initially of making work which was simultaneous, existed across different cities, was performative, and really would engage with as many people as possible who weren't necessarily coming into our art centres or into our gallery spaces. So they're some of my favourites, and I knew I was going to get asked the question, so I may have preempted that one. Okay. Over to you.
Up to me?
Yeah.
Yes, I think it's now the time. I see already Claudia raising the hand. I would, yes, first of all, ask our partners if they would like to add something. Of course, we could talk 3 hours here about the content. In total, I think we produce around 50 projects, and we had 20 workshops, and every year connecting cities events, so there is a lot of content, what we have now and what we have to evaluate. But first of all, to you, would you like to add something? I forgot also to present Ekmel from Amber Platform in Istanbul, and with then your remark to open for questions and wish us all a nice opening. You would like to add something?
Maybe we can take questions from the audience?
What? Sorry? Yes, or questions? You have any questions? Then we ask you a question.
So are there a few more questions from our future innovators to Susa, Mike and Nerea, who already have experience in working together on such a topic, connecting cities, for quite a long time. So something you want to know from your next few days, where you want to share something or have some questions to what they experienced and what they developed, or anything you want to add?
You finish with that, I'll make a comment. I'd just also like to add, of course, that if there's anyone from the European Union here, we're also really grateful for the funding. And it's very much within the principle and the belief that the European Union is a good thing, even though I'm the one from the big society and on the island that's trying to close its borders a bit quicker than everybody else. But in terms of an agenda to maintain open borders across Europe, all of these arts and cultural projects are really significant. And that basically we need to recognise that the European Parliament actually needs us to represent these projects in a really serious way. Because they're also trying to defend their own patch, and they also need to defend their own budgets. These are important things that we're doing across the partnerships, and with many other multiple projects, of course. When we started, there was plenty of talk about Fortress Europe. It feels like we could easily be heading back into a Fortress Europe situation, which is not very good, I don't think.
Yes. Then maybe a last announcement of the projects, what we are going to see here.
We are going to see quite a few Connecting Cities projects. So first of all, you can already see False Positive by Mark Shepard, Julian Oliver and Moritz Stefana. It's at the Central Park here. And then within the Future Mobility District, there is Esel Complain. That's one of the outcomes of the Connecting Cities research residencies here at the Ars Electronica Future Lab. And we will see 4 more projects at the Ars Electronica Facade on Friday evening at 9. So 3 of them are also an outcome by the Ars Electronica Connecting Cities research residencies. And one of them is produced through the open call. It's already announced by Tamer. It's Flame by Tamer and Onur. And tomorrow there will be the Connecting Cities Symposium. So I want to say thank you, Susa, Mike, and Maria, and thank you to the audience. So there's now a few minutes break until we start with the next program point, and that's the STARTS workshop. Thank you.